What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am a very sweaty and headache-induced Dan Favale coming at you with my certified fantabulous co-host, Grant Hughes. We have so much to talk about, but first, I must remind you, implore you, subscribe to us wherever you're consuming us. YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe, comment, help the algo love us back, and subscribe to us on Apple and Spotify if you haven't already. Ratings and reviews on Apple help a ton as well, especially the written reviews will go a long way. In addition to those 5-star ratings, follow us on the socials. They are on your screen. If you're watching, they can be in the podcast description, or you can listen to me say that we're at HardwoodKnocks on Twitter and TikTok and at Hardwood_Knocks on Instagram. And you know what? If you don't follow Grant on Twitter at GT_Hughes, spelled exactly how it fucking sounds. Before we get into so much, just so much to get to, the question that everyone's dying for, that they've been pining for, probably waited all weekend to hear the answer to. Grant, how the heck are you?
I'm doing well. I'm curious mostly about why you're so sweaty, because you don't look particularly sweaty. But if you're going to point that out off the top, I have to follow up on that.
I squeezed in the gym, right? Which is why I was 3 minutes late, because I was scrambling. I got the link to you in time, but I was 3 minutes late today because I was scrambling coming back from the gym. And so like today is one of those days where I don't know if you like, I have every fucking minute like planned out. And so it's like after this, like, yeah, I'll edit and produce this on the audio. And then I have to go on to another podcast. And then we have stuff due for BR tonight. And then I have all this other side work that I need to get done, that I need to edit a short that we can post tomorrow on TikTok or whatever. So it's just one of those days. And so I am very much just a dead sprint, and I didn't have time to change or shower before we were on. So if anyone can smell me, you're very impressive.
You're making me feel very lazy, because I have my day planned out too, but that sounds exhausting to me.
You have like a family and a job, and you go to the gym in the morning, so you make me feel lazy.
Yeah, and I did shower out of courtesy. So, but again, if you hadn't brought up the sweatiness, I wouldn't have noted it. What I do notice, it's not good streaming for those that are watching, but I'm kind of a fidgeter. This is the thing you learn when you watch yourself enough. Like right now, I'm rocking back and forth as I say that. Are you a fidgeter? I'm fidgety. This is the thing you start to learn about yourself the older you get, and I have to admit I'm an unabashed, uncontrolled fidgeter.
Right. I think I'm definitely a fidgeter. I can't sit still, but I'll notice if I watch back, my eyes will dart all over my screen and the tabs, and I'm trying to follow, like, if I'm posting like a promo on social media for this, or I'm trying to timestamp. And so I'm like, I hope it doesn't look like I'm not paying attention to what Grant says. I'm just trying to like multitask, finesse the shit out of this.
Yeah. Well, when you've got every second of your day planned out, you've got to get a few things done at once. So, good peek behind the curtain, though, to kick this off. Good thing there's nothing in the NBA we really need to talk about today. No big news or anything.
And not to delay us further, but for another peek behind the curtain, and they will be dropping soon, we have merch.
Yeah.
Look at that. Seriously on Serious. There'll be stickers and shirts and other sayings. Look at the little previews right there.
Beautiful.
So those will go live eventually. We're just tweaking some stuff. And I tweeted out a preview of a bunch of the different shirt sayings we have. So be on the lookout for those. And that's another way you could support the show. Not really financially, because we make negative dollars on that basically, but just in terms of brand exposure. We do have a funny story. I do want to very quickly. When I got our first batch of orders, they sent me 2 of the wrong shirts. One of them said all feelings are okay. I was like, oh, okay, whatever. I got this shirt. What does that say, Grant?
That says, first of all, great design on it. There's some scissors for those of you who are not watching this. Some scissors in the middle of a multicolored circle, and it says vasectomies prevent abortions, which, like, factually true, I guess. But we're really struggling with what side of the aisle this shirt comes from.
I asked you as soon as they sent, and I was like, is this like a super like needed to go to someone in like the bumblefuck Midwest that is just whatever? And it could lean either way. If it's on the look, everyone knows politically how this podcast skews. I was trying to figure out, like, you noted that it might just be right down the middle.
It's kind of like who's got a problem with this would be my question. And that I don't know what the answer is.
I struggle to think it's a pro-lifer, just because wouldn't they be against vasectomies? I don't really know how that works.
I don't know what their stance is on that. It's a good shirt. Also, I mean, it's just it's good, looks good. I don't, the looks you would get wearing that. again, probably about equal, depending, everybody would double take because that's a wild thing to have on a shirt, first of all. But I don't know who you're offending with it.
The other thing is, I told you this, and I know these shirts, if anyone orders them, please aggressively skew towards larger sizes. I went up to I'm wearing a double XL right now because I assume it's going to shrink, and I just like to wear baggy clothes to the gym. And that's what I'm doing, by the way. I'm wearing all this to the gym, and I see people looking at it and reading it, and they want to know what it is. I'm just waiting for someone to ask me. But it's like a child size. And so I'm like, that's a whole new level. Use your children as billboards for Hardwood Knocks. I know Grant already sent me a picture. I think that was of Mac, right?
Yep.
So
up with the shirt.
But are you using your child to promote your whatever agenda this is? I was very confused, but not basketball related, but I thought it was funny. I don't know what I'm going to do with these shirts.
I think you got to keep it. Just find a niece or nephew somewhere that feels.
I'm going to wear which is clearly like a youth female shirt. I'm going to wear the all feelings are okay tank right here. I'm going to show up to the gym like that. And we'll see if anyone asks me about that one. No.
Just how you're feeling,
That's, by the way, that's why I was like, well, it can't be a pro-lifer because they wouldn't wear the feeling shirt, right? So I was just so confused.
There's just a lot to unpack, and we're never going to know because it's if you send an email to TeePublic and just say what's going on here, the robot will answer you and say does not compute. Keep the shirt. I
am eventually going to email them and be like, hey, could I get the shirts that I actually ordered?
Well, yeah, maybe that. Can I get more of these vasectomy related shirts, please?
Yeah, we'll have those up in the Hardwood Knocks store soon.
Yeah.
So let's talk about we're actually not going to talk about actual basketball to start. Let's get to before we get to the Doc Rivers firing, let's get to the Ja Morant stuff. He was seen on IG with, I already forgot the guy's name, but he was the one who was banned from NBA arenas for a year after the whole laser pointer incident with the Indiana Pacers. He was on an IG live. Ja Morant flashed another gun. His friend had the self-awareness to no, this shouldn't be happening, and duck the phone away. You could argue, well, why are they on IG live? And the Grizzlies promptly suspended him, which I actually don't know what that means when we're eliminated from the playoff already. All team related activities. And it's is he out of the group text? How's this work?
Great. I mean, I don't have to go do our charitable offseason endeavors. Awesome. I don't have to show up for whatever the equivalent of OTAs are. Cool.
Right.
Fine with me.
And so I have a few thoughts that I would just like to throw to you. Is one, this is the least serious of them all. Are you really doing this again to stream to 100? Did you see there's 121 people watching this? What are you trying to do? It's 121. I mean, more people have seen it now. I hate, and if there's been, and we've seen it, there's racial unjust rhetoric when we come to this discussion. And I kind of hate how we talk about this sometimes and how it's oversimplified and how people are just oh, he's done. It's over. He's going the way of so-and-so. That's really dismissive. I mean, racist, just sort of unfair. However, I don't think we need to twist ourselves into a pretzel and be well, they were in the car. He wasn't in a public strip club. And it wasn't he necessarily crossed state lines. And he could have been, I think everyone was well, he was either in Tennessee or Alabama or something. And their open carry laws are different. And here's my issue. Even if he wasn't doing anything illegal, I purchased the gun legally, he's in a state or whatever, you already got in trouble for this once. And clearly, given how swiftly the Grizzlies suspended him, there needed to have been a warning. If you want to displace blame on parts of the organization for enabling him behind the scenes for so long, go right ahead. But I'm not here when we live in the capital of the world of just gun violence, where you're just willy-nilly waving a gun around. I'm just not here for the excuses, especially when this happened already. And finally, I don't want to hear the just young argument. He's 23. Do you know how fucking easy it is not to wave a gun around on an IG live at the age of 23?
I've never done
it. There are dozens of other players in the league doing it. 23 years old is old enough, especially after you did it the first time, to know this is not okay. And who would have thought that his 36 hours of therapy didn't prove to be a panacea? And my real last thought is I worry, we didn't see him use it this time, but when they turn to the mental health aspect of this, I will never doubt someone that says it. But I don't want to see it used as a shield either, because then it does diminish people who are actually not only dealing with this, but actively trying to improve their situation, improve themselves, or feel like actually seek treatment. And I hate the way we talk about it. I've probably said some things that people hate there just now, and I don't need to mean to stumble through it, but I'm just, there's no caveats. There's no excuses here at this point. There's nothing. This is just an all-time fuck up by John Morant here. And I don't even want to be talking about it.
It's really hard for me to not like think about it or talk about it in ways that are not condescending or like paternal, because it just feels so. The thing that resonates most with me is I can like separate out almost all the particulars. Like you need to consider like it is a gun, that's a dangerous thing. He's obviously like messing around with that I can separate out and still like kind of get to where I'm at on it, which is like you did a thing that cost you a ton of money and got you in a little bit of trouble, and clearly, created the possibility that were you to do it again, you would be in substantially, like exponentially, probably more trouble. And we can talk about, I want to ask you about the suspension that's coming probably from the league in a minute. Like, it's as simple as like, you did a thing that you got caught doing again, and you knew you were going to get in trouble, and you did the thing again. It's like, it's so hard for me to separate out like the parental like angle of this, because it's just like, this happens. And like, again, this is such a dick thing to say. I don't mean to compare him to a child. I've seen that said a lot, and the maturity aspect of this is very real, but I'm uncomfortable saying it. But it's just as simple as like, your kid does something, you punish them for it, they do it again. So now you have to now it's like, you're just incredulous because everyone was clear on what the expectations were and what the consequences for not meeting those expectations would be. And so now you ramp up the consequences. And the question is, how severe will it be? So I'm kind of receptive to I don't like it as an excuse that he's 23 thing, but I'm receptive to the immaturity argument, because clearly this is immature behavior in the specific sense that like you touched the stove and it burned you, and then you went back like an idiot and touched it again and put your hand on it for longer. It's like bad analogy, but it's kind of just like, how do you not digest the lesson of the thing you did wrong? And so I would say that like the mental health stuff, I was cynical about that as an excuse from the outset. Again, feel like an asshole being like skeptical, cynical about it. It just never rang true to me. And now I think it's like, you can't go back to that. You can't play that card again, I don't think, or at least not without doing like actual work to address it, not spending 2 days or whatever it was, like for PR reasons, frankly, is what I think it was. It's like, that shouldn't be a hot take. I think this was a damage control thing the first time Morant got caught. And so now it's, who knows what's going to happen. But it didn't do anything to dispel my cynicism. And I'm annoyed by how difficult it is to talk about it without like having to discuss a grown adult like he's a child, because he's just operating and making decisions like a child would. So I'll just put it to you, over under 50 game suspension.
Whoa. I'll go under. I didn't even want to play that game necessarily, but I was going to say it's going to be longer than 8.
Here's the thing.
If it's, you know what? If it's not, I want to make 2 things clear. This is not irredeemable. I don't think John Morant's career is over. He's one of the brightest young stars in the league. I don't think this says that he's a terrible human being. I just think like this is getting out of control. My second one is, if it's not, I don't know what the suspension should be, but if it's not substantial, or if he just doesn't get one, Adam Silver's a fucking coward. Like, this is not I can't even elaborate on that. So just, you can go ahead. Like,
no, here's the thing. So I think if this were David Stern, like you could name almost any punishment. Like, you could talk about a year suspension, because part of what happened the first time around is like there was a face-to-face conversation in which Ja like expressed contrition and claimed he was going to grow from this and understood why this was a problem. Clearly none of that was followed through on. And so I think because Adam Silver must understand that if he doesn't come down really hard, then he looks weak, right? But the other thing is, like, this is a problem for a league that for a very long time had a reputation that it was trying to shed, which is like, these guys are thugs, quote unquote. Like, that word was out there all the time and it was bullshit, and it still is. But I think the league is still really conscious of how are we presenting ourselves in terms of like, how do we market these stars? Like, how do we appeal to the broadest possible fan base? And anybody that's predisposed or wants to reach back to the like all the Allen Iverson dialogue that was happening and all that other stuff that David Stern just like dropped the hammer on super hard. Remember the dress code? Like, that was a real thing that happened, right? Heavy handed, like, again, like paternal, like just probably racist also, all that shit. All of it was designed to make sure the league was palatable, to make sure that the image that players were putting out there was like maximally marketable. This is like a reach back to the problem the NBA thought it used to have in terms of its marketability. So like, I would not be surprised. Like 50 is a crazy number, right? But when you combine the fact that he did the exact same fucking thing again, like really soon after he did it the first time and said all the right things, which were obviously bullshit. And you've got that aspect. You've got Adam Silver feeling like he has to send a message, and you've got the big business interests of like, we can't have our most marketable young star who's got a signature shoe line doing this, because that's just going to make everyone who's predisposed to think this think again that the league is just, these are immature millionaires with like bad reputations and they're all punks. And like, I don't think that. I think that's the wrong thing to think. I think, of course, like, I don't feel like we should need to say that, but like, the optics are a big problem for a league that was like laser focused on cleaning up this exact kind of thing not that long ago. So that's a meandering way of saying like, I do think a significant suspension is imminent. I don't know what it'll be, but 50 seemed like a provocative number.
I think Lance Robertson in the chat brings up an interesting point. It has to be a 20 to 25 game suspension, enough to knock him out of any legitimate award eligibility. The biggest fuck you that it could actually be would be like, you know what? 18 games. You had 64 and like you didn't and I know there's like exceptions, but you would have to literally play in every, like there would just be, that would be the biggest fuck you. We do need to move on to the Sixers, but we have, I think this is a compliment in the chat. Militin Kekachevich, I apologize for butchering the shit out of that. I often wonder why so few of us are listening. Your content is often very good and rarely not worth listening. I appreciate your guys' effort. We appreciate that. Alexander Pavachevich, I'm so sorry, guys. I think they have a larger pod following and that they're just transitioning to YouTube. That's basically it. We do have a much larger, we get way more downloads than we do YouTube views. I can tell you that. But you could also tell your friends if you would like to see our YouTube views go up and see us get more popular. So I appreciate those sentiments. Do you want to talk about the Doc Rivers firing? And I'm not really going to give you a choice. I'm just going to say that you do. Yeah. Can we start by, it was probably one of the least surprising moves. Now, I want to get into the fallout, how surprised you are by this happening. But did you see the odds on who is going to be the next Sixers head coach?
Yes, I did. It's JJ Redick has the best odds. Yeah, throw him up there.
JJ Redick is number one at 3-1. And I just want to say that betting odds, as a rule of thumb, are a reflection of what people are like actually investing in, not of reality for the most part. And I want to know what type of brand JJ Redick has that people decided to flock to him. Monty Williams is second. Nick Nurse is 3. Jay Wright I thought was interesting, but probably just because of like the geography of it all. Mike Budenholzer and him are tied for 4th, followed by D'Antoni at 5th. And they mentioned already, the reporting specifically said that D'Antoni, Budenholzer, Nurse, and Monty Williams were all involved. And I think so was Sam Cassell, who's at 18-1 down. So Allen Iverson, by the way, laying 500-1 if anyone's interested. So,
I mean, that's worth a dollar.
Yeah, why not? I would love it if they did that. Allen Iverson's just coaching the Sixers. It's a gap year. Like James Harden's not there anymore. Yeah. Doc Rivers clearly wasn't the reason that I thought he probably had his best season as a Sixers coach this year, maybe. But do you like? It's hard to. I guess I'll throw it to you on this. It's kind of hard to argue against this decision, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, just from the his ridiculous losing streak in Game 7s and all this stuff, and you see Rasheed Wallace talking about this. This all comes out like now, of course, or at least gets amplified now. talking about Doc doesn't adjust, talking about he puts too much on the players. That's from Rasheed Wallace, not my analysis necessarily. His record is what it is. Then James Harden just like giving the most like dead fish handshake of an endorsement,
That one was
saying his
not taken out
relationship
of
was
context.
okay.
Joel
No, that
Embiid's
was legit.
comments,
Yeah.
Joel Embiid's comments were they needed the full context of what he said. Whereas like maybe the answer still wasn't great, but like it was the James Harden stuff was not taken out of context.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I guess like, yeah, pretty foreseeable for several reasons. Because Morey didn't hire him, first of all, right? Morey showed up after Doc was there.
And he was
so
still there
that's always like
2 years, 3 years.
Doc for 3, Morey for less than that, I think. But maybe that's wrong. But whenever that is the case, like if the executive didn't hire the coach is just on borrowed time. Like that's just like how it works. The thing that all this stuff makes me think of, because the other, Redick at the top of that list is kind of wild to me, and the Toronto interview was kind of wild. We discussed that a little bit, but you see most of the other names, the ones that seem likely: Nurse, Budenholzer, Monty Williams. All these guys are just mostly going to swap places, and so it ties back to I forget who said it. Forgive me. This was on Twitter I saw, and you see it happen fairly often when coaches get fired. But the idea that like it's really easy to look at a situation and say this coach isn't working for whatever reason. Usually it's just the players have stopped listening or don't believe that he's the best person to run the show or whatever. It's really hard to decide who will make this work because there's so many moving parts and there's so many variables. I mean, the Sixers, number one, like, is James Harden going to be there or not? That talk about a variable for the next coach and like what kind of coach you might want or not want, depending on if he's there or not. But it's just really easy to look at like the Sixers or the Suns. Like the Suns is harder. I think Williams got a pretty raw deal. But it's easy to say like, well, that didn't work, so this coach has got to go. But then like, it's not like the work is over. Now it's just like, you got to figure out who's going to make this work, and that you can just never know. You can never know. So that's why the same guys are going to just flip flop, and Monty Williams will be one place and Budenholzer will be somewhere else. And, they'll all have 3-year stints and then probably get fired again. Like that's how it'll work.
I do think James Harden's future is going to inform who they end up hiring. And I think I don't know if the word is interesting here, but like this is not, I think everyone's and it's going to end up being in James Harden's court, where if he wants to go back to Houston and that's what he wants to do, that's what he's going to do. But like this is not a no-brainer for the Sixers. His max salary next year is $46.9 million. If it was a 2-year deal or something, but you're not maxing out James Harden for 3 and 4 years now, are you?
No, of course not.
And I want to know, I'm wondering if this is going to be a consequence of, Rob Sheldon says in the chat, gotta believe Harden will be lobbying for D'Antoni, wouldn't you? But does Harden even stay? Yeah, I mean, that's the question. I think D'Antoni might factor in prominently if James Harden really loves playing for him, which by all intents he did. But like, we're talking about the Sixers, they might not run into it this season, but like the Dubs, the Clippers, we're talking about that second luxury tax apron. I'm wondering if another consequence of that is we're going to see star players not get paid as handsomely as deep into their careers. We're like a James Harden situation now. We're like, if Philly has to start thinking about that a couple years down the line, you can't have James Harden on the books for $50+ million.
Yeah.
Because like you're going to need the wiggle room to build elsewhere. This is a quick aside. What a terrible decision by the players union to agree to that.
It's wild.
It's so bad.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it makes it, I mean, it's bad for the players because it's so clearly a win for owners who want to basically have a hard cap, because this is how it's going to function. And if anytime you have a hard cap, it just means that the players are getting paid less money. So that's bad, right? Like the penalties are it used to be okay if you had deep enough pockets and it's never okay, but you could pay Harden $50 million when he's like a $20 million player, because that just costs you extra money.
Yeah.
But now, in addition to spending all that extra money and having all the tax penalties, everybody that listens to this podcast probably knows we've never really discussed the second apron, but like, costs you a bunch of roster building resources. Like your mid-level's gone, your trade flexibility goes to like 0. You can't take in money or send it out. You can't aggregate. You're going to have your first rounder kicked to the end of the first round. Like all this shit happens. And you need all that stuff when you're overpaying a guy by like 2.5x. So like that's it will. So to your point, you're totally right. Like you have to start thinking extra hard about, well, we can overpay for a year and the back end will suck because whatever, Harden's going to age or whoever else you're talking about. But like, it's just the calculus just has to be different now, because that 1 year where you're willing to overpay and just eat, we'll deal with the rest of it later. Like that's not an option anymore for almost any team, no matter how rich the owners are.
And by the way, some of the other punitive stuff where it's like, not only can you not trade your draft pick 7 years out in advance, so this year that'd be the 2030 pick, but if you hit the second luxury tax apron, I think for 2 of 3 years or 2 of 4 years or whatever, that pick just gets moved to the end of the first round. This is just
right.
I'm sorry, what a concession by the players. Fucking terrible. Did the end of the Celtics series change your impression of, I don't want to say the Sixers at large, but of Joel Embiid at all? And I don't mean to, I feel like this is low-hanging fruit in a sense. Joel Embiid is one of the, he was a deserving MVP this year. We both had Jokic though, I think, right? Mm-hmm. Or did you have Embiid? Whatever. No, I think an either or situation was fine. Mm-hmm. Like there's always stuff with him in the playoffs now. Like his playoff numbers by and large are not great. He's always dealing with an injury. And I think that needs to be part of your team building calculus moving forward as well. Not that I don't think Joel Embiid can be that you can't win the title with Joel Embiid as your best player, but can you win the title when you have Joel Embiid as your best player and then James Harden as your second best player because of what his playoff track record is now? And it is what it is. James Harden had 2 all-time great performances against the Sixers. And then like pretty much every other game sucked there. I think there was a normal game sprinkled in there, whatever.
Yeah.
I like that has to change your calculus of how to flesh out the rest of the Sixers roster, because right now and look, they're a team because the aggregate stuff for that second luxury tax apron does not kick in, I think, until 24-25. That's why I think this is going to be a summer of like bonkers player movement, at least via the trade market, because some of these teams are going to be trying to be ultra aggressive there. Your pathway is Maxey pops into a better than an all-star type player, which it could happen, or you're using Maxey to acquire someone else who gives you the cushion that you don't currently have. So you have to credit the Celtics in that series for their adjustments. The Ben Taylor did a great video for Thinking Basketball about how they insert RW3 in the rotation more, and you have Al Horford just getting out of Harden's way. This brought up questions though about, well, why can't Harden? He's good at Ben Taylor framed it this way. He's great at exploiting like stuff that he knows about, but can he adjust in real time? So there's a level of the Celtics definitely won this series, but I can't help in the back of my mind. I'm like, even if you get James Harden on the sub max, or if it's let's just say it's a 2-year max or something, like I just don't feel as comfortable. And they were 1 win away from the conference finals, so I get that this might be a little too hot takey for some people. I just don't feel great about this Sixers core moving forward. And I thought they had like a really like between depth and just personnel, but they still feel like they need one more really high-end player, or like they really need a smattering of super high-end role players. Like I'm talking 3.
So you've gotten to take a giant victory lap, as Rob Sheldon said, Embiid with the largest scoring average drop by an MVP in history from regular season to playoffs. He's talking about. I want to get to that. But you've gotten to take a victory lap on your Nuggets title pick since the preseason, and you've deserved it because they look amazing. I want to take a little victory lap, because when we talked about this series in a preview sense, I thought it would start with the Celtics are going to play double bigs and have Rob Williams guard PJ Tucker and roam off of him and ruin everything. The Celtics didn't do that until game 6, and it swung the series. So clearly I am a better coach than Joe Mazzulla, because I thought that's what they do from the start, and it absolutely worked. I just did that was the thing that changed it and swung the series in the Celtics' favor, which like to like dump on myself a little bit, like that should have been the obvious thing, because that's what made you so good last year and made your defense incredible and got Robert Williams Defensive Player of the Year consideration and got you to the finals. And then the Celtics just didn't do that very much. So anyway, just little self-congratulations, because I thought that's what they should have done.
Shoulder with that.
Yeah, no, it hurts. It's rough. No, but the other thing, so about Embiid, I think you're right. This is like kind of not a great time to be evaluating it, or to jump to sort of, I don't know, be definitive about the Sixers and their core and how viable it is going forward. because you said it, they were really close to making the conference finals, and Embiid was clearly hampered, right? Like I don't think you can talk about anything that happened with the Sixers without, somewhere in the top 3 in terms of what you have to mention is he played with the injury, that LCL sprain, that probably, had it been the regular season, he'd be out for like 2 more weeks after today, let alone like back, playing in this series. So like that just makes it so like, because by that logic, if you ran the whole thing back, dock everybody, and just Embiid doesn't have that issue, there's a decent chance the Sixers are in the conference finals right now, and they're the title favorites and not Boston. That's a totally like possible scenario. The counter to that is Embiid is always hurt, and his playoff production always suffers. And so at some point, you just have to say, this is the expectation now. That doesn't mean you necessarily change how you build the roster, because every team is like just completely subject to how healthy its best player is. The problem is Embiid just over and over is hamstrung somehow by an injury in the playoffs, and his production dwindles, and that's just where we are. So I don't know what the answer is in terms of how this changes the way they build the team, because they should just say, well, let's put more shooting around the Embiid Harden pick and roll and just see how that works. If everybody stays healthy, that's about as good a chance as we can realistically have. I do think the Maxey piece of it, he's looked really good in some stretches. I just wonder if his status as like a perma defensive target for the other team is going to be an issue, as like, if you need him to be better than an all-star, I think in terms of playoff impact, that's going to make it really difficult. Like, he may very well make multiple all-star games during the regular season, and then unless he's better defensively, he just won't be as valuable in the playoffs. So the Maxey piece is interesting. Tobias Harris, what do you do there? Is he movable? Like, if you're worried about the tax penalties, like, holy shit, like that might be where you start. As Lance Robertson says, maybe trade Harris for a longer contract. Yeah, but I mean, we just talked about how, punitive being over that second apron is. You want Harris's money, maybe a little bit less money for a bunch more years, and then you get into the repeater stuff. That's brutal. So there are real challenges. The injury complicates everything, because I don't know that you can say this team wasn't good enough. It just may not have been healthy enough at a particular position, right? Like, is that an oversimplification? Do you have, like, that's so unsatisfying, because you want to just say, well, let's tweak this and tinker here and do X, Y, and Z. But, other than bringing Harden back at a number you can stomach, I'm not sure what you do.
The complexion of their offseason changes a lot differently if you're able to view this through the lens of, well, if Embiid's healthy, this is fine. You're just at the point where you can't say that anymore. And I think, look, I don't know how they make changes. As Lance had mentioned, maybe trade Harris for a larger contract. Harris is making $39.3 million. That's not a throwaway expiring contract. I don't think he's a terrible player, but that number is it's relative to the value he's providing, at least for the Sixers, isn't even close to what he's worth.
Yeah.
What are you attaching to him? They can trade 1 first-round pick this summer. They can trade 1 first-round pick. Harris and 1 first-round pick gets you what?
I mean, like a bad contract. Still a bad contract that runs longer.
And it's just like, Harris 1 first-round pick and Tyrese Maxey get you what? I don't even know who the best player is that you could acquire with that. And so I think I know everyone got into the discussion, well, will Embiid request a trade? And I don't really want to get into like that aspect. I do think the market for him might not be as frothy as people think, just because of these injuries and because he's 29 or whatever he is. But my question to you, and it's twofold. 1, do you think James Harden is back in Philadelphia next season?
Oh man, you just have to yes or no this one. I'm gonna say yes. And that presupposes that the Houston stuff is maybe just leverage, which I feel very uncomfortable with, because it feels kind of real. But I'm going to say yes.
I'm going to say yes too, because I just can't fathom that he would go back unless we've seen other teams just get multi-stars at once, and the Houston Rockets could absolutely do that. But I do think the fact that there was reporting from Mona Shelburne that said Harden would want Rivers fired, and they went that route. He has a good relationship with Morey. I think he'll be back too. Now, my question to you is he back because the Sixers gave him a max of 3 years or longer?
Oh man, I don't know. Well, because it's Morey and because they have this relationship, you might assume that there's already an agreement in place, and it dates all the way back to him taking less last offseason. I think so. I'll say this. I think he's back because he's going to get a 3-year max-ish deal, and because they're probably saying if you would like Mike D'Antoni to coach this team, that we will make that happen. That I think there's probably a couple things that are in the offing for him.
So the final thing I'll throw there is over under James Harden's salary next year, $41 million.
What do you make this year? 36.9, something like that.
His max is 46.9 million next year. So we'll set the over under at $41 million for the first year of his next contract.
I think it's over. I think he's going over.
And
don't you?
Look, I think it's under. I think maybe it'll be like a 4-year deal. That's kind of like maybe averages 40 on the button.
Yeah.
Something like that. Alan Davis says Sixers want to run it back with the same personnel, different coach. I'm going to tell you right now, they're not going to win the title next season if they do that. It can't be the same personnel because you have to plan around what Harden's going to be in the playoffs, which is sometimes really good, sometimes preposterously bad. And then you just can't count on Embiid to be healthy. You can't do it. He's going to go through an entire regular season. Maybe he's not we had this, I can't find the comment right now. Did Joel Embiid wear himself out from Rob Sheldon? Did Joel Embiid wear himself out being so obsessed with the MVP? I mean, maybe, but like he's dealt with stuff every single playoff. So did he wear himself out every regular season? Alexander says over but declining on the James Harden number. That might be a good way to look at it too.
Sure.
So if the average annual value is $41 million, would you take the under or over on that?
Well, I think probably still over, just because I don't think it's likely he's going to agree to a deal that declines in value. The other thing we should note is because of the over 38 rule, they can't offer him a 5th year. The difference between what the Sixers can offer and what another team can offer on a 4-year deal is actually pretty insignificant. So I guess if you're saying, if you're of the mind that Harden's going to leave, that's a pretty decent piece of evidence that the Sixers can't really give him a lot more than another team could.
They can go, 4 years, $210.1 million.
Yeah.
And another team can go 4 years, $201.7 million.
Yeah.
And
not a big deal.
The difference would come if the Sixers aren't willing to pay that. And the Rockets are just like, hey, here's your 4-year, $202 million max. And the Sixers aren't willing to go anywhere near that.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. Is D'Antoni the next coach? Is that that's too obvious of a solution?
I kind of feel like it's going to be Sam Cassell or Mike Budenholzer.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
Do you think it's going to be D'Antoni?
I think it's going to be D'Antoni.
At some point, you got to stop running back the 2018 Rockets plus Embiid. Like at some point, right?
Based on everything else that Morey has done since taking over the team, like it seems he's very much interested in running back those Rockets teams because you've got PJ Tucker. Who else is there? Daniel House. I think, and if this is what happens, you will just see the Harden Embiid pick and roll, which ridiculously effective all year and ever since they've been together, surrounded by more shooters. Like that's just what it's going to be. And so maybe the move is to just make this into the 2017 Rockets. You trade Maxey for like 2 guys that are 40% 3-point shooters or something. Like I don't know. Maybe they just want to run it back and just one last ride with Harden and Embiid pick and rolls 1,000,000 times a game with 3 shooters on the floor. I
guess my question is this is why I wouldn't trade Maxey. Is do you trust Embiid and Harden to hold up enough and play well enough in the playoffs to where you're just saying, well, yeah, we can trade Maxey just for complimentary. But and look, Maxey's super complimentary. But if you would skew more towards we want 3-and-D guys who aren't going to create with the ball in their hands. Maybe they can't even attack in open space like Maxey can. And I just don't think they can just do that. And so it's almost like if you could get Zach LaVine for Maxey and a first and Tobias Harris, would you do it?
I don't know. I mean, I just think it's a long odds play. Maybe it's a long odds play no matter what, but we know Morey is obsessed with like, how do we increase our championship equity by 0.7%? And like, yeah, it's really unlikely that Embiid and Harden can hold up for a full season in playoffs playing that hypothetical, style. But like your championship odds in under any circumstances are pretty slim. So like, yeah, you price in the chance that this won't work because of injury, but maybe even that is still a better, has a better championship equity, percentage than, I don't know, doing whatever else, running it back or keeping Maxey. Who know? First of all, what we do know is that Morey has been thinking about like, how do we add a couple percentages to our equity, like since before the playoffs started. Like that's all they ever do there.
He probably has like 80 moves mapped out that we haven't even thought about. And I will say we want teams to go for it. So I'm not saying they shouldn't pay Harden. They kind of have to. But I will say, just running it back feels like foe going all in. Where it's just
Maybe
not,
so.
like you need to make, I think, some sort of material change outside of the coach is where I'm
Yeah.
at. Do you want to talk about a topic that's going to be super dated because game one is in a few hours?
Yeah.
But the Lakers Nuggets series, which I think we're both just enthralled by and kind of annoyed that we have a deadline for something else related to the lottery that happens during the middle of it. If anyone wants to peek behind the curtain, uh, what are your overarching about
Yes.
that?
Overarching.
Where's Jamie? Is he watching? What are your biggest overarching thought heading into this series?
I think the most interesting aspect of it to me is how different this will be for both teams. Again, like that's always the most fun thing for me is, when the Warriors went from the Kings to the Lakers, it was just like it was almost a different sport. And I think that's going to be kind of the same way for this series. I really just want to see tell me what you think about this. Jokic is the playoff MVP, right? I think that's, it's been Butler
He's
and it's
also the
been
regular
Booker.
season MVP, but that's neither here nor
Is
there.
right. So, but like, I would argue that I think Anthony Davis, because of what he does on both ends, is like not that far from Jokic in terms of like current postseason value or impact. I think in the Warrior series, Davis he was the guy that changed the whole series throughout it. Just where is he? How do we scheme around him? How do we get him away from whatever we want to do on defense? And then how do we keep him off the offensive glass? How do we guard him? Like he just was the guy in that series, which is wild in a series that involves Steph Curry because usually he's the guy. I think it was in fact Davis that required the most like attention during that series, and his team won the series, so that's a factor. So I'm fascinated to see what Davis can do in the Jokic matchup, and how much is he going to guard him? My assumption would be like the vast majority of the time. What do the Nuggets do to like the Warriors did to try to make Davis be less of a factor than he is? To make him to minimize the extent to which he is a factor, which means like pulling him away from the basket, involving him in a bunch of other actions. Like, how do we tire him out? How do we keep him away from what we're trying to do? How do we go away from him on the other end? I just think it's going to be really interesting to see Jokic tested, by, I think, probably the guy that I'd put maybe second now among postseason players in terms of impact. Just, it was hard to watch that Warrior series and not come away from that thinking anything but like this guy is just like he's such a problem. And he's not even shooting jumpers like the 2020 version, but his defensive impact is so massive. And his offensive impact is like ridiculously great, but like secondary, which just speaks to how much of a difference he's made defensively. Can he and LeBron hold up? We've asked it every series. Like, I just think that matchup, which is like, of course, we're going to start with Jokic versus Davis as like the most interesting thing.
No,
but that's like, I don't know what else to do other than start there. Cause everything else you talk about tactically, personnel wise, matchup wise, kind of spirals out of that. I feel like, cause that's the real meat of this series.
So I thought I had a novel thought and I should know better. And then I listened while I was at the gym, humble brag, at the gym. I listened to the Thinking Basketball preview on this series. I listened to the Dunker Spot, and I listened to the Zach Lowe segment on it. And they all asked the same question. How much of this matchup do we actually see? And my thought was, AD is so good defensively that you can put him on Jokic, and I think he could do a bunch of other stuff. But like if you put him on Jokic in the post, or if he has to guard Jokic from the outside and Jokic decides, hey, I'm not going to work from the outside and like I'm just going to try and cut up the Lakers defense from here, it does pull him away from all the other stuff that he's able to do. And like maybe they won't spam pick and rolls because they just want Davis locked on to Nikola Jokic. And so I kind of wondered, well, do you have Davis help off, like guard Aaron Gordon or somebody, and then do all the other stuff that he's doing and try and get away with, do you try Jared Vanderbilt? He normally defends like advantage creators, but do you try Jared Vanderbilt? Do you try LeBron on Jokic? And then on the flip side, I was like, if you're Jokic, I think there are ways, if they're going to just stash AD, like at the top of the key, give him the ball, Jokic can defend that. Fine. But if they're going to get AD the ball in motion, like getting him going downhill, and he can either go right into Jokic, catch and go that way, or he's behind Jokic, I'd worry about Jokic getting into foul trouble. And if you're the Nuggets, you try and avoid that by pulling him off Davis. And so I'm like, maybe we just won't see this head-to-head matchup as much as we think. And I'm like, I bet you no one's talking about that. Everyone's fucking talking about that.
So No, hold on, real quick. I just my response to that is because I think you're right. I think my assumption that they'll just match up the whole series is maybe oversimplified. But like, if not Davis, I think Jokic will just put Vanderbilt in the basket over and over and over, and you're going to have to send doubles. And when you double Jokic, you've just conceded defeat because he's going to find an open shooter. And if you like, I don't know what else you do if it's not Davis, because I think the way that this series ends the quickest is Jokic dominates in the lane, which is where Davis is supposed to prevent you from dominating. So like if the Lakers concede Jokic getting post ups, getting deep position, just bullying smaller guys, that's like you're just playing from behind a little bit. So that's why I take your point. I think we'll see a lot of moving pieces matchup wise, but I think the Nuggets would be ecstatic if Davis spent a bunch of time elsewhere and other than Jokic.
Well, and then also if you're the Lakers, the trickle down effect is if you don't have Davis, or excuse me, for the Nuggets, if you don't have Jokic on Davis, also, so you have KCP on LeBron at that point instead of Aaron Gordon. And so that creates all this type of issues. But you mentioned Jared Vanderbilt. I'm wondering if this is a Jared Vanderbilt series.
Always a question.
Is it, or do you just skew smaller with, well, we're going to play a whole bunch of like Dennis Schroeder, Austin Reeves, and D'Angelo Russell together just to make it harder on the Nuggets because look, if they're able to stash anybody on Vanderbilt, like the identity of their entire defense is just able to remain intact, which is, hey, we're going to mostly play ultra aggressive, like at the level of the screen. And then we're going to trust everyone behind Jokic to just make these scrambling rotations and help and make all the right decisions, which they've done to their credit. That just gets a lot easier when you're able to leave Jared Vanderbilt wide open in the corner, as opposed to, okay, well, if that's a Reeves or a Russell or a Schroeder, like they're going to be able to attack, or you just trust them to knock down threes more.
I think if Vanderbilt is able to play significantly in this series, it's a pretty big indictment of Denver's defense, because what you said should be what happens. Like we see it over and over. The deeper you get in the playoffs, if you have a guy that you don't have to guard beyond the 3-point line, that isn't like a pick and roll ball handler or rim rolling big, like that guy just gets played off the floor. And if Denver cannot succeed defensively with Vanderbilt on the floor on offense for the Lakers, like that's a real problem, because they should be able to cheat, to have advantages, to send extra help off of him. And then the other end, if he can stay on the floor, not only is that bad news, does that mean Denver's defense is failing despite an advantage? It also means Denver is going to have a way harder time scoring. I do think Denver's offense is so good that they're going to score, and the Lakers have the best remaining playoff defense. But like, if Vanderbilt can play a lot, I think that's a bad sign for the Nuggets, right? Because you shouldn't be able to get away with it.
Right. Or it just might mean, which would still be a bad sign, that he's shooting like 9 from the corners every game. And that's also an issue. The other thing I did want to mention with this series is I think because that we might see some more matchup reconfiguration than most people are talking about, there are going to be moments where LeBron is going to have smaller guys on, where it won't be Aaron Gordon, let's just say. And they need him. Like we saw it more. They went to him in the post against the Warriors. I think he averaged like 5 post-ups per game against the Warriors. But like his drives, and part of this is his foot. We know he's playing on that bad right foot. He went from averaging like over 10 plus drives per 36 minutes to basically he's averaging like 7 per 36 minutes right now. The Lakers are going to need him, I think, to be more aggressive, especially if they're going to if Denver winds up putting smaller players on him. If your whole thing is like Aaron Gordon's going to be locked into LeBron, and LeBron is not a decoy, but like he's going to, like Aaron Gordon's just out of everything else. Okay. And then like, that's sort of a small victory there. But if the Nuggets feel comfortable enough, like, oh, we'll throw Bruce Brown or KCP or even Michael Porter Jr. on him for stretches because we don't think he has that burst, and we're more worried about, we have these sturdy guards in KCP and Bruce Brown. And Michael Porter Jr. is like, he's big and long. He's not like maybe super strong. I think this needs to be, and I say this knowing LeBron's averaging 25 and 5 and just shot like 56% on twos, and he caught fire from 3. He was at like 39% over the final 5 games of the series. This needs, to me, in my opinion, needs to very much be a LeBron James offensive series. And I feel like the Lakers have relied on, okay, we're a lot deeper at guard with Reeves and D'Lo and Schroeder than I think anyone ever credited them. But there's also been, okay, well, Hachimura has it going during this. And like part of that is we're taking what the defense can get us. I don't think they're going to be able to rely on that inconsistency of depth, in the sense like they've always had enough, but it never feels like it's the same guy, if that makes any sense.
Right. Well,
And
you
I
get a
think
Lonnie Walker game and you
that's
like
well,
that
shout
that's
out to
not
Darvin
something you can
Ham, who
rely
just
on. Yeah.
is this like is Darvin Ham scheming in his head and knows all this, or is he just look at the Lakers and like, we have so many guys who can play, but we're just so imperfect that I'm just gonna fucking try things? Or does he actually know? These are our weaknesses, so I'm pushing the right buttons that no one else is thinking about.
Yeah. I had a thing on LeBron too. I think you're totally right. Like, not only does this need to kind of be a LeBron aggressive series, just because the Lakers are going to need to keep pace scoring wise, it's going to be difficult, especially in the half court. But like, it needs to be, I don't know how you necessarily accomplish this, because Denver has been working on avoiding these situations all season. Can you coax, when Jokic comes up to the level of the screen, which I think he will more often than not, if LeBron's the ball handler, can you coax a switch or two? Or maybe LeBron gets to drive downhill at Jokic. Maybe. That's something you're going to want to hunt. Again, the Nuggets will drop a lot. They'll do different stuff in the pick and roll. But I think you want to look at that. The other main thing is, like, the Lakers during the season, second most percentage of their points in the restricted area of any team in the league. So like, they score a ton at the basket. That's just a huge strength of theirs, right? This shaky 3-point shooting team, suspect. Like, LeBron's been cold. You mentioned that, all this stuff. If this turns into a 3-point shooting series, I think that's bad news for the Lakers. They need to get stuff at the basket. And in conjunction with the Lakers loving to just pile up points inside, Denver second worst in terms of opponent accuracy in the restricted area, 71%. Been a problem all year. It's not all on Jokic. Some of it's schematic. Some
It's
of it's
better during the postseason. I don't know if that's.
But have they played a team that's tested that weak point yet? I would argue they probably haven't.
Yeah.
So that's the recipe for the Lakers succeeding, because they must find ways to score in the half court. That's been their half court offense has sucked in the playoffs. They will depend on transition offense, right? The problem is the Nuggets don't run as much as the Lakers do in the playoffs, but their points per possession in transition is better than the Lakers. So if you up tempo this game, maybe you tire Jokic out. But if I'm Denver, I'm good with that.
His arms might get a little red, but he'll be good.
Right, his arms will be red. His maybe some shoulder tightness from outlet passes. But so if the Lakers want to run, Davis and LeBron get tired. And the Nuggets are just better at that on a per play basis anyway. So the Lakers have to score in the half court. They have to score at the basket. And that's going to fall on LeBron more than almost anybody else. So it's not just a LeBron James series. It's a LeBron James has to make a bunch of layups, basically, in the half court for the Lakers to score enough to keep up.
And and I know he deviated from it a little bit in the last year, but they can't have the odd numbered, even numbered AD games either. I think what's critical, as good as he's been, even at times on offense, I mentioned this before, you need to get him the ball moving. I will say these two teams do not, despite what the Nuggets personnel might suggest that they're able to, having Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray, these are looking at the semifinals alone, last and second to last in 3-point attempt rate. So they're not relying on a ton of threes. But if it does become a perimeter-based series, I do think that favors the Nuggets. What I also do not think helps the Lakers is they are at not their most dangerous, but two of the fundamental elements of their offense are, we are going to get to the foul line and we are going to get out in transition. The Nuggets do not foul. So, you know what, if it's maybe they're allowing parades to the rim, that might change. They might foul there. But if they're not sending the Lakers to the foul line, their offense is going to be good no matter what. They're going to get their defense set. So the Lakers probably aren't going to be in transition as much. And so I think you could reasonably go into this, and this might be an oversimplification, and just say, well, I think that Denver, just by default, is going to disrupt, not because they're doing anything wild defensively, schematically, or super effectively, but they're going to disrupt two of the core tenets of the Lakers offense, which is, okay, that's awkward. And then you kind of have to deal with the counters to that. We already think this might not be a Vando series. Is this going to have to be a Malik Beasley series for the Lakers? Because they're going to need that 3-point volume and that outlet in the half court. He's just disappeared from real minutes. And I think the idea of Malik Beasley is absolutely important to this team. It's just, I'm not saying that he's an X factor. I just feel like there are more problems that the Nuggets are going to cause for the Lakers than vice versa, which is probably a spoiler alert as to where my pick is going. But anyone who listens to this podcast knew where that pick was going anyway.
Right. I think the only other aspect I wanted to talk to you about before we get to the pick, unless you have something else, is
how much does Max Christie play? Yeah, I'm not sure.
just enough, probably. I'm concerned about the Nuggets because the Lakers defense is really good. We haven't said enough about how good their defense has looked, especially with Davis in the game. I think Jokic is going to play a ton. That's just that because it's the playoffs, and the deeper you go, the more that needs to be the case. I think if the Lakers can just dominate, like hold the Nuggets to just a preposterously low level of offensive efficiency when Jokic is not in the game, I think that's I'm looking for ways. I'm like tipping my hand too here, pick wise, looking for ways for like, what does it look like if the Lakers are successful? And I think a lot of that has to do with the Nuggets just almost literally don't score without Jokic on the floor, which is not that hard to imagine because the Lakers defense bottled up Steph Curry for the most part. Like they've just, the defense is good. It's great. Like that's just what it is. Everybody's playing hard, even though they're kind of small. When they play, especially the 3-guard looks with Schroeder and even D'Lo and Reeves, like it's working. So that's one way I could see the Lakers having success. Do you have any other, we've talked about LeBron scoring at the rim. We've talked about, a couple other things. Before we get to the pick, how else do the Lakers sort of create advantages or exploit advantages? Have we covered the bases?
Well, I think the one you touched upon right now might be most critical. Is just like when you kind of look at those non-Jokic minutes, which I assume will just be aligned, like they'll be the non-AD minutes aligned with the non-Jokic minutes. Maybe LA is willing to play Davis more than Denver's willing to play Jokic. That's not a comment on Jokic's conditioning. I just think we could see, like the Lakers kind of, LeBron James is 38. Like we're just going to play Anthony Davis 48 minutes. But the lineups, you mentioned both these teams playing small. LeBron against the Nuggets going small, like with Jeff Green and Aaron Gordon as their de facto centers. That could be huge because the Lakers have been better without LeBron James on the court during the playoffs. I don't think that that's going to, that's not an indictment on LeBron, but I'm saying like that might flip this series. And the thing that I'm wondering is if you're the Nuggets, and I get why they do what they do, where they don't want to stagger Murray and Jokic too much. I understand that. But like when we have the Murray non-Jokic minutes, why don't we see, I know you're concerned about the defense. I'd like to see MPJ and Murray more in those stints together. And it might come at the expense of defense, but if the Lakers are also going to be playing small, why can't you kind of roll the dice on that to kind of just see, well, can we score better with Jokic? And look, they've had pockets during the playoffs where they've done well without Jokic, but during the final, I think it was 4 games of that Phoenix series, like they were a minus 24 with Jokic off the court. And like in 36 minutes with the Jokic off the court, they were outscored by 24 points. They were a minus 3 without Jokic in the game where they just embarrassed the fuck out of the Phoenix in game 6. So I'm looking to see if that's where the Lakers can really create an advantage is during those non-Jokic minutes, because having LeBron without AD, thank you, Siri, having LeBron without AD is so much different than having Jamal Murray on his own without Jokic.
Yeah, I think that's right. Do you want to make a pick? I feel like I know.
My pick is Nuggets in 6, partly out of obligation because I think I picked them to win a title at the preseason. I will say this is the 3rd straight series I'm picking against the Lakers in. Wildly uncomfortable about it. But I look at this team and the Nuggets, and I'm just like, they have it. They have everything they need this year. And the Lakers, I think you can very much pick out and say they're really good. They're better than expected. But this all feels like unsustainable. And I feel like they haven't run into the Golden State Warriors are this great team in theory, but I feel like they haven't run into an elite team just yet. And I think the Nuggets are going to be able to expose them more than any of these other teams because they are such a steady fucking force when it comes to we're not going to foul and our offense is going to be so good that we're going to get our defense set. And as I mentioned before, I really think that that's going to derail 2 of the core tenets of Los Angeles's success.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add to that. I think that interplay, the Nuggets offense scoring just, as much as it wants and setting the defense and forcing the Lakers to play a pretty bad brand of half-court offensive basketball swings it. I'm going Nuggets in 7, and that's mainly because I think Davis has the ability to almost make as big an impact as Jokic does. And with that being potentially in a best case scenario, I think Davis could be close to Jokic's level, will not outplay him. And then that leaves LeBron versus Murray, MPJ, like the rest of the Nuggets supporting cast, which I think is probably better on the top end, but not quite as deep. I don't know. 7 feels okay to me. I just think ultimately the Lakers haven't faced an offense this good in the playoffs yet. And I think maybe the fact that the Warriors weren't quite as good as maybe, like you said, they're theoretically this great team. I'm not sure we can be certain that the Lakers defense is as good as the numbers say. And I do think the offense is probably about as bad as the numbers say.
I wanted to, and I feel like I kind of danced around asking you this before. Do you think that AD's defensive impact becomes muted at all if he is saddled with that primary Jokic assignment? I think that's why that's so much of what, that's also another way that you could disrupt the Lakers is just by not like, because when you look at Anthony Davis in the Warrior series specifically, where it's like, he's coming up to like, he's going to drop back or he's going to, but also close out or like vice versa. And if you're locked into Jokic, I just don't know that he's able to guard the perimeter and protect the basket all at once.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think it would be difficult because of the personnel differences for him to have as big of an impact. But I do think he's someone that Jokic is going to have. Like, if it is Jokic that has to guard him, like, man, that's a load, right? Like that, his mobility, his athleticism. If you get pick and rolls working where Davis is one of the best roll men ever. Like, I think
they just don't use him like that all the time. Which
that's
is why
the thing. Like, can you find ways to do that? I guess what I mean to say is Davis has the capacity to almost equal Jokic's impact, or maybe equal it if everything breaks absolutely right. And so that's why I think it's a long series. It could just be that the Nuggets are unstoppable offensively and the Lakers run out of juice, because or at least I've been questioning whether Davis and LeBron can hold up every series they played so far. So maybe this is the one where they don't, and it is a short series. But I think you got to hand it to the Lakers a little bit that if you made it this far, I think you've got what it takes to at least make this very interesting based on 6 and 7 games, right? That's pretty solid for a team, for a playing team, and started 2-10 or whatever it was.
Celtics Heat. What is your biggest overarching thought leading into this series? Which I will say, the Heat are a compelling story. I find this series infinitely less fascinating than the one we just discussed.
Doesn't it feel like the Heat just don't like not that like they're going to turn back into a pumpkin, but doesn't it feel like they just don't quite have enough against a team that is its best players healthy, unlike I'm picking nits, I guess. Doesn't feel like the Celtics have quite as many flaws on either end to exploit. It doesn't feel like the Celtics are going to be like overwhelmed with defensive intensity. It feels like the Celtics can attack more things than, say, the Knicks could, or it just, I don't know. But look, we've expressed disbelief in the Heat since the play-in. So like that gives me pause. So before we're way jumping the gun, I'm interested to see again, does the double big lineup for Boston persist? Like, is this something you're going to start the series with? Who does Robert Williams guard, like, quote unquote guard, which means like, who does he ignore most of the time to clog up the lane? Do you even need to do that if you're Boston? So that's the defensive side for the Celtics. Offensively, is this just going to be a series where, it's extremely high variance? There's going to be blowouts both ways just based on who makes a bunch of threes and who doesn't. Because that's part of the reason it's less interesting to me, is because I could just see it being a make or miss series. But I don't know. Those are my two things on either end. I don't have nearly as much to say about this as I do about the Western Conference Finals.
Shout out to Rob Sheldon for being up at 2:30 a.m. their time and listening to us. Yeah, the dual big stuff is interesting because I kind of feel like, while we did mention that that's what they should have made that shift earlier in the Philly series, I kind of feel like the opposite here, I guess, because I guess you could view it this way. If you play RW3, do you like the idea of, okay, well, that means Miami's probably going to play Kevin Love more? Or do you like the idea of, well, we're going to go small and then they'll play Caleb Martin a bunch, or if they decide to play Kevin Love, it'll be easier to mismatch the hell out of that series? I think for the Heat sake, even if Boston's playing big, I might just consider going with like Caleb Martin more, because when you look at how many like weak points Miami might have to exploit, or I mean weak points in the sense like these are small, Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, who's not small, but Kyle Lowry, like these smaller guys or outright defensive liabilities. And then you're starting to look at Boston's perimeter players and you're like, oh, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and Derek White and Malcolm Brogdon, holy shit. And so this feels like the Heat need to play small no matter what. But I do feel like it's Boston who's probably going to dictate the terms of engagement. I combined dictate and terms there. dictate the style of play, just because I don't know if the Heat, like how, and like you kind of run out of bodies too. If Boston goes big for long stretches, like you kind of have to, if you want to play big, it has to be Love and Adebayo. You're not going Love and Cody Zeller in those minutes. And then you don't really have anyone else who's just big that you could, like, Yurtseven's not going to be dusted off for this series. So I think Boston could look at it as, well, we get to dictate the terms of engagement, and that's what we'll go with. I don't know that I'm concerned enough about the Heat's offense if I'm Boston to deviate from what they were doing all season under Mazzulla, which is I want to play 5 out. I want to have all of our, I want to have Hal Horford plus 4 of these wing players that can handle the ball. So I think that's the style they'll lean into. And look, Robert Williams III changed the series a bunch. I just don't know. He had some really bad moments in that series as well, too, where he just looked super slow, where guys were getting by him. I don't know. Do the Heat have the ball handling juice to make that happen? It'll just come down to, leaving Kevin Love or Max Strus or even Duncan Robinson is just different than leaving PJ Tucker, who doesn't want to shoot.
Right.
And that could create some problems for Boston. But I will also say, shout out to Rome 8180. It's the first time I caught a Hardwood Knocks pod live. Just be sure to download the audio version still, Rome. Thank you very much.
Rate, review, subscribe.
Yeah. And just plug. Look, stickers, everybody.
Yeah.
Who hasn't seen them yet. So the Heat, for all the credit they received, they shot 45% against the Bucks. They then turned around and shot 31% on threes against the Knicks. And they were 30.6% against the Knicks. And then they were at 31% on their wide open triples during the final 3 games. And the biggest offenders there, I think I have the notes for this somewhere. Yeah. Caleb Martin, 2 of 6, Kevin Love, 1 of 7, Gabe Vincent, 0 of 7 during that stretch. You need your role players to hit those wide open threes. And so then maybe there is a pathway to Boston saying, all right, like if Kevin Love's just going to not shoot well from 3 anyway, like we could do whatever the fuck we want. So I think the barometer for this series is going to be how well is Miami supporting cast? And I'm looking at Strus specifically, Gabe Vincent, Kevin Love, and even Caleb Martin. How well are those 4? And I guess Duncan Robinson too. How well are those 4 or 5 guys shooting from 3? Because that might really determine how Boston wants or needs or prefers to play in this matchup.
That's what I mean. That's why it's kind of less interesting, because it's a make or miss. Ultimately, at the bottom, it's a make or miss analysis for the Heat and the Celtics. But like, I just think of it in terms of options. So if we can talk, we have talked about, well, how will the Celtics go 2 bigs to start, or will they not? Well, it could work either way. Like they could be totally fine having Robert Williams start on Kevin Love, assuming the Heat start Kevin Love, and saying like, if you want to shoot, this is the PJ Tucker argument all over again. If you would like to shoot, and again, Love's a different level of shooter than Tucker. If you want to shoot 10 threes a game, and if you make 7 of them, we lose. And if you make 3 of them, we win. Talking from the Celtics perspective. Yeah, we could do that. Or we could just switch everything, because like, what matchup are you concerned about? I mean, Butler on anybody's a problem, but beyond that, like, I guess I'm okay with literally any of the Celtics starting 5 defenders, or like, assuming Robert Williams is not on the floor, guarding anyone on the Heat. If you flip it, there are real matchup problems that the Celtics can just hunt. Heat do not have options, I don't think, in terms of like, who are we going to pick on? Whereas the Celtics definitely do. And a lot of that has to do with size and just, Max Strus, well, maybe he'll hold up and maybe he'll hit a bunch of threes and maybe X, Y, and Z will happen. The problem with the Heat for me is like, okay, well, their adjustments are going to be, they'll just do more Heat stuff and like try harder and just conjure, wins out of like grit and a zone defense that Spoelstra comes up with on the fly. Like it's hard to imagine the Heat like, oh, there's the button they can push. Whereas the Celtics are just like sitting at a control panel with all these levers to pull, all these different, they just have so many more options. And I think maybe that's the simplest way to break down a playoff series is who's got the most like viable, strategic or personnel tweaks to make when things go sideways. And the Heat just like don't have any.
I will say, do you worry about, because I was going to say, what vulnerabilities are you actually worried about with Boston? And it feels like they're going against the Heat zone could create problems for them because there's variance to how they play. And they ended up shooting really well from 3 overall in the Philly series, but like they can get topsy-turvy from mid-range. And they're bad at consistently getting to the rim without RW3 on the floor.
Mhm.
And then if you put that up against a zone, like, do you trust them to bust up that zone? And if they're not able to, you're not going to see their, okay, rim volume might not be a big part of what they're doing. But then if Miami's able to limit the fouls, and we've seen what happens when Boston kind of devolves into the your turn, my turn stuff with Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum or even Marcus Smart. And like, those are the situations where if they don't get into their early offense, they're liable to make a bad pass, or they're just able to dribble the ball into turnovers.
Yep.
And the Heat will eat them alive if that's what happens. And so I think they're a good enough shooting team to where I think the variance in their 3-point shooting is overstated. But when you look at like how upside down things can get from the mid-range for them and how difficult it can be for them to get to the basket in general, like, playing RW3 with Al Horford, does that help or hurt their ability to bust up the zone? I guess having RW3 rim pressure would in theory help, but like, it also makes you a little easier to defend because you are taking away one of the shooters. And look, if Al Horford's going to shoot the way he did for much of that Philly series, that's going to open up a bunch of defensive options for Miami as well. And so those are my concerns for Boston, where I agree with everything you said. It just feels like they have more options on the table, and not just more options, but a lot more options. But the two things I worry about is, will there be variance against Miami zone? And then the thing, and you alluded to this, I just like, what are the Heat fucking doing, right? Like, I just can't just shake this feeling. Like, is there just some sort of supernatural phenomena going on in Miami where I don't want to boil it down to this? It's not they want it more or they're going to play harder, but it's just like, are they going to figure out a way to do this? Because what the fuck are they doing here in the first place?
Right.
Based off what we just saw in the regular season, and they don't have Tyler Hero or Victor Oladipo. When it's, oh, hey, Kyle Lowry's going to come off the bench and just be really fucking good for most of the playoffs. It's just, and Duncan Robinson's back in the rotation. And look, Duncan Robinson is dribbling. I just can't, I can't wrap my head around what's happening.
Yeah, I think there's like a self-preservative instinct when it comes to the Heat now, in terms, like, from our perspective of like, clearly we're not understanding something, or there's something that we have not been able to put a finger on, other than like, they will just, maybe they do want it more. Like, at some point we'll learn how to quantify that. Or like, maybe they are just capable of playing harder. I don't know. Cause we're kind of out of other explanations. Obviously, like, they're extremely well coached. Their best players are very experienced in highly competitive games. They're very, very willing to adjust, adapt, try different stuff defensively, and the effort level never wanes. So yeah, there just is that sort of scary thing about the Heat, or picking against the Heat, which I don't have anything else really to say on this series. So I could spoil it and say, like, I am in fact picking against the Heat in this series in 6. I think Boston wins in 6. That's a weird number to pick for the team with home court advantage, but I just have to give the Heat the nod of, I think the Celtics will have a game where you talked about, their offense just looks like they've never like played together before. And
they've also lost 3 home games through the first 2 rounds. Is that like they've lost at home? That's happened.
So I think it's Celtics in 6. But man, if Heat just come out and win game 1 because they want it more, and we finally get a metric to prove that, I'm going to be pretty nervous.
These are want it more metric. These hustle stats don't do it for us.
No.
I'm with you. I have Celtics in 6 as well. This is the 3rd straight series I'm picking against the Heat. So I'm fully expecting to be wrong about one of the Lakers or Heat. Rome 8180 Grant, this is in reference to the beginning of the ep, but I podcast, and I've been on that podcast, and I'm worried the day when we finally start doing YouTube live streams, because I fidget a lot too. I don't rock back and forth that much, but I touch my face constantly.
You know what? We're all human. This is just we're breaking down the walls. We're all just our authentic
selves. That just makes it more relatable. Like, we're not trying to be super polished with high production value here. We want to be super unpolished and gritty, much like the Heat. There you are.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about some of these eliminated teams now?
Yes. Let's talk real quickly here about. I want to start with the Warriors.
Shocker.
Yeah, well, there's not a lot to say. I think, honestly, I expected the loss going into game 6 there. And so the heartening thing was that it does seem like the core is going to stay together. At least they're speaking as if they want to do that. So maybe Draymond will be back on a lower annual figure, or just roughly where he's at with his player option, whether he opts out or renegotiates and extends after opting in, whatever. The Jordan Poole trade's a big thing. I think that's, like, I don't know what the percentages are on that, but it seems more likely than not to happen. And then the question is, does Jonathan Kuminga get looped in as a sweetener, which is kind of wild that you might need a sweetener on someone you signed to a fat contract just last offseason. But yeah, other than that, I mean, Bob Myers, will he be back or not? I don't know. That's a big deal that kind of will affect, because if you bring someone else in that job, although it seems like they'll promote internally most likely, it is easier to bust up the core.
Will be Kirk Lacob
if you're so inclined. It sounds like it might be a Lacob, but there's Kent and Kirk, so you got a couple choices there. But yeah, I think I guess, like, as a fan, I'm heartened that at least it seems like the core will stay together. And if that means there's a 45 win season next year with those guys involved and different, supporting pieces, yeah, I feel okay about that. What are your thoughts? Like, were you surprised that the core was kind of like, yeah, we're going to run it back?
Yeah, well, what else are they? First of all, most of them are under contract aside from Draymond Green, and we don't know what Draymond Green's market would be. I'm trying to think of the team. He has a $27.8 million player option. What cap space team is going to go after him? And then you're dealing with sign and trade scenarios, and it's even kind of tough to spot, like, well, which teams are going to be, we want. There will be teams that want Draymond Green and would pay him that money, but what are you giving up to get him if you don't have a cap space? And so it feels like the most likely outcome all along was they're running this back. And so the questions become, well, if they bring everyone back, let's say Draymond Green gets 20, like his player option number, they're going to be on the hook for like $500 million in player salary and luxury taxes there. They won't have their mid-level to improve the roster. They're going to, if they trade Jordan Poole in the cap space, they're not going to have their mid-level, I don't think. And it's just, what are you, my first, I think we've buried the lead. You mentioned it though already. What is going to happen with Bob Myers? And it's clear there's a report that the Warriors have offered him multiple contracts. Do we know what his motivation for leaving actually would be? Does he not want to do this anymore? Does he want to do something else? Does he not want to be responsible for like the non-Steph era in Golden State? I haven't seen, unless I've missed it, I haven't seen anything on why have the offers been that disrespectful, which I can't believe, because it does seem like, aside from Steph Curry and Draymond Green, they kind of recognize that the third most important person is like the architect. Like maybe Kerr's up there, but like Bob Myers is one of the 5 most important people when it comes to building up this Golden State Warriors dynasty.
It seems like the illusions are that he just has options, like he could go, he did a podcast during the season and it was good. And like, he could go into media, he could go work for the league. He could go to some other team where he would absolutely be the highest paid executive in the league. It sounds like they're talking, the offers have been, well compensated, but I have not seen it reported that the Warriors have made him an offer that would make him the highest paid executive in the league,
which is kind of wild.
Yeah. I mean, although like, if it would
did
be hard to make
the Jordan Poole contract. You're right. Yeah.
It would be hard to do that if you weren't sure he wanted to be there. Like if it wasn't just the money, but yeah, like based on the Warriors have been the most successful team from a championship perspective over the last 10 years. Like he's kind of the guy. He's had his misses, but by and large, like, I don't know how you don't reward that unless you're not sure he wants to be there. So, and really, like, it is all very tied together, because if Myers is not back, I think it just gets harder. The relationships are so, like, we're talking about 10 plus years for, so like, it's just harder for any other incoming executive. Easier if it's a promotion from inside to navigate every, Klay Thompson's next contract negotiation, to talk to Steph about like, what do we need and how, like, just all the dynamics are so like solid and so established and so built over time and ups and downs and all this other stuff. Like, it's just anyone else in that position will fundamentally change, every aspect of how every contract gets, dealt with or every decision gets made. It's hard to overstate the Myers component of this, which is tough, because I think the report today was like, he's going to take a couple weeks and think about it. I mean, like, July 1's not that far away.
Like the draft is coming up and so is free agency. I mean, to be fair, there's not much they can do on either front. So it's just like, if you're worried about the decision-making, it's on trades or like finding, I guess, like undrafted guys or second rounders. But has the other component to this is, does the way their season ended change the scale at which you think they need to tinker with the roster, to where, okay, Draymond, let's say he's coming back. We know Steph is coming back. Klay Thompson had a pretty good back end of the regular season. His performance towards the end of that Lakers series was just sobering and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And you look at what Jordan Poole contributed at mostly a high level, not so much in the finals, by the way, but he contributed at a high level to a championship team. Mm-hmm. I think that matters. But even when he was at his peak, this idea that he could carry units without Steph, even going up against opposing benches, was always sort of overstretched. And the fact that he can be so easily targeted on defense, the fact that he was unplayable for stretches of this playoff push, like what does that make you think that they need? Like, do they need another like caps lock star? Or is this just a matter of, okay, well, if they can futz and fiddle and add on the margins, which they can't really add on the margins because of their limitations. It's if you're looking at, okay, we're willing to trade Jordan Poole and Jonathan Kuminga, and it's just, what are you looking to get back in such a package?
It's a huge challenge because it's such a weird, it's been hard to build around the way the Warriors play and to have any, secondary creator like work in support, in relief of Steph Curry. Like, who's the most, is Sean Livingston probably, like playing with Andre Iguodala that's kind of the best the second unit ever was. And like, well, you're not getting like, those are weird player types, and they succeeded because they just didn't really turn it over, and they defended and they won with size and they were smart. I think in answer to your question, they need someone who can do what Poole was supposed to do, which is if you can play with Steph Curry, great, and be a threat on and off the ball to relieve pressure from him. But the main thing is you've got to get somebody that can make it so the offense doesn't just come unglued whenever Curry rests. So yeah, you need it. It's tough because then, well, if Poole is the guy you're trading, where are you going to get the guy that's just like better than him, at what he's supposed to do? It's a weird kind of challenge trade, a 1-for-1 kind of thing. I don't think it will be a 1-for-1. I think Kuminga will probably be involved somehow. But yeah, you just need someone that can make the offense work with or without Steph, but certainly without. So I don't know what that is. Like, it's interesting to me to think like, well, could they go get Anunoby for Kuminga and Poole, and I don't know, some weird package structured that way? Like, yeah, maybe, but is Anunoby like, does someone like Anunoby solve the problem? I don't know. I mean, he makes the team like more dangerous in terms of like a defensively, and like maybe your closing five scarier because Poole was rarely part of that anyway. But that doesn't solve, the what do we do when Curry's not running the offense stuff like that. That's the hard solve. I don't know what the answer for that is.
And I think that's where I'm at, is I feel like that's what they need the most. And that feels like an incredibly large acquisition needs to be made. So, and I just don't know if they have the asset firepower to do that. So I'm at a loss there, but I think it starts with Bob Myers. I would say Draymond Green will be back. I think if I had to set like a percentage of Jordan Poole and Jonathan Kuminga still being on this roster next season, I'd set it below 50%.
For sure. Yeah, I think so. And Clay will be back. I just don't, I don't think he's tradable. I think his next contract will be significantly smaller. I can't believe any of this, he wants a full max. Like, that's just not realistic. The Warriors wouldn't do that.
He's not. And look, he's just straight up, he's not worth anything near that.
Right. Glasgow says, what do you guys think about Nerlens Noel for the Warriors? Not solving the problem. Their bigs were fine, right? Like Looney and Draymond were fine. So yeah, they need guards. They need wings. They need guys that can do something with the ball.
They probably can afford Nerlens Noel though. It
might cost them their mid-level exception and like 2 first-round picks because of the second apron if they sign like literally anybody without trimming tons of salary. Almost impossible to do.
The Phoenix Suns, I would love to talk about. They fired Monty Williams, who I think that you saw it coming, but I think he's the one. I don't know who got more. I think he got more of a raw deal than Mike Budenholzer. Timing aside, Mike Budenholzer lost his brother. That was just very iffy. The other thing we mentioned with these coaching firings is you always think that they're made when they're coaches at this level. It's very easy to say, you already mentioned this, like, okay, it's easy to say when the team needs a new coach, but it's harder to say when you make that decision, and two, who are you getting? I feel like, and we haven't seen any of the vacancies filled yet, and granted, Doc Rivers was just created, and same with Monty Williams. These are decisions you make when you have the guy, right? Like, that that you want. So a million things to talk about. I want to know, though, what you make of Woj having in his piece that Matt Ishbia has taken full control of basketball operations and then removing it, which, as not a reporter, but as a writer, like, there's got to be something, an earlier version of this story when it's that major of a thing. It wasn't a statistical correction, but like, you removed a key piece of information. what are we fucking doing here? We know you pissed off somebody. Like, we understand how this business, like, come on, own it. Like, at least put it in there. An early version misstated. But I'm like, between how the Kevin Durant negotiations shook out and now this, I'm like, this is either, I respect Matt Ishbia is willing to spend, at least it seems like, whatever. And the broadcast rights stuff that he seems willing to eat money on that, fantastic. But like, this is either going to be, all right, hell yeah, or, no. Oh, no.
Right.
No.
The hands-on owner is a little concerning. Yeah, I had that thought too of, and Woj, I think, did go on the air and basically say the same thing that he pulled out of the article. So it seems pretty clear that like this was an Ishbia decision to fire Williams. Whether that was coming or not, I don't know. It's hard to imagine it would have happened so quickly had it not just been almost predetermined. But yeah, like, we've talked about how there's like a reasonable case to be made that the Durant trade is going to like not age great and may not look so, you probably do it all the time. It's Kevin Durant. We said it over and over, but like that seemed to be an Ishbia thing, including, what was it? Crowder was the sticking point and they threw him in there or something else. Like it seemed like he just was like, make it happen. And then the coach firing was kind of like, this is what we're doing. And then it's a little different, but like being on the sidelines and getting into it with Jokic, like that's just another like tiny data point of like, this dude is like in there. He's in there. And I don't know if that's good.
We didn't talk about this. I like how he did handle it afterwards.
Yes.
He was like, I don't want Jokic to spend. I want to make that clear.
Agree. But it's still, it's like there's those two things, the trade and the coach firing, and then like a million miles down the list, there's the Jokic thing. But it's still another thing. I think an impulsive owner or one that clearly wants to make a splash is a total double-edged sword. And you said it, like, might be great, might spend a bunch, might really go all in to win. You want that from every owner, generally speaking. But then like, Vivek Ranadive in Sacramento really was hands-on in a lot of aspects of that franchise for a long time. And it was a big problem. So like, there's a line to walk. And I don't know, it's way too early to say what side of that line Ishbia is going to fall on. But the coach, Monty Williams, getting fired, might be like leaning a little bit to the wrong side of that line, I think. Although, like, this is the last thing I'll say. Like, if Booker and Durant wanted Monty Williams to stay for like unequivocally, he's still there. So, and like,
you probably could ding Monty for whatever weirdness existed with DeAndre Ayton. And was he like culpable at all in the Jay Crowder situation? That seems like a total organizational failure on everyone's behalf. But I'd like, even that is just like, unless Devin Booker and Kevin Durant were like campaigning for, not to be confused with campaigning, but if they were actively advocating for a different coach, like I just don't, I feel like he kind of got a roll. Like he had 8 games during the regular season with Kevin Durant before getting into the playoffs. And I think you could argue, as Zach did, that they weren't inventive enough on offense with KD. It's just like, could they maybe get like a training camp though, or something? If you have the guy, and I don't know who the guy is, they've been linked to the same names the Sixers have been linked to, which are the same names as that the Raptors have been linked to. So or many of the same names, I should say. I don't know what the outcome there is, but there's also, I think you look at this roster and it's easy just to say Kevin Durant will be back, Devin Booker will be back, and the certainty ends there. There was already a report that they're going to try and shop Chris Paul, who has like almost $16 million guaranteed next season, and then DeAndre Ayton, who's owed 3 years and $102 million. I just don't know. I feel very comfortable in saying that you cannot have DeAndre Ayton on this roster, not because I don't think he has the ability to be better. You just can't, for the center he is, you can't allocate that type of money to the 5 when you're paying as much for Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. I just don't. And I'll have trades to throw at you later on in this segment. And we already went through one of them that you shot down. And I agree with you. Like, these aren't trades I would necessarily do. It's just DeAndre Ayton's value is at its nadir, because you can argue technically when he's making more, it makes it easier to match salary. But like when he's making $30+ million a year and playing like he just did in the playoffs, well, that's just going to make him a lot more unattractive to other teams. And I don't know. I think the Suns will still be able to use their mid-level this year. I don't think they're going to run into that apron issue. It'll be tight, but I don't think they're going to run into that second apron issue just yet. But it's just like, they're going to be like a target that would make a lot of sense for them is a Bruce Brown. That's someone who's going to get more in the taxpayers mid-level exception at this point. And so unless teams start to hold on to their full mid-level and want to use it as in trades or whatever, but it's not going to be easy. Just that they need like depth at almost every turn. And so the idea of, well, let's turn these large salaries of CP3 and DeAndre Ayton into more digestible contracts who actually play. My question to you, is it going to be easier to do that with CP3 or DeAndre Ayton?
That's tough. It probably Ayton. And just, I wanted to get back to the point you're making. Like, subtract all the like communication issues and the bad body language and all the benchings and stuff. The issue with Ayton is just like, he's paid too much for what he does, and like part of that comes from being the number one pick. Part of that comes from the idea of potential. Part of that may come from like what he might actually be able to do if he weren't the fourth or fifth option. So there's upside there, but like, it's just a financial thing. You can't overpay for centers that aren't superstars or like no questions asked, total defensive anchors. That makes it harder. Having said that, I just don't know what to do with Chris Paul. Like, so he's got like 15.8 of 30.8 is guaranteed, and the guaranteed 8 is like shortly after the finals. It's like late June, right? So do you want him, like, which version of that salary do you want? Like, do the Suns waive and stretch him? I think there's just more questions. Like, it's harder to fit him in a lot of places because of his age and because of the way he's going to play. So I just think it's more complicated to move Paul, and Ayton is still like, even though, the bloom's off the rose a little bit, or there's concerns in his on-court impact, his attitude, all this other stuff, he's still like a 20, not quite 25-year-old number one overall pick that was the starting center for a team that made the finals, was up 2-0 and then won 64 games next year. So like, it seems like he's a little more, I could talk myself into there being more teams interested than with Paul. Paul's a weird fit, financially and otherwise.
I almost wonder though if the shorter term commitment makes him more appealing. But I will say the market seems more finite because of his age. It's like, okay, the Clippers, like Marcus Morris and Robert Covington for CP3, and however the money needs to work under the new rules, done. Actually, the aggregation stuff doesn't start till next year, so done. Like, you could do something like that, but it's like, okay, well, now you're starting to run out of maybe the Wizards, because they're the Wizards, would be like, hey, CP3, but like, what are you getting? Who are you getting from the Wizards? You're not getting Kristaps Porzingis to pair with DeAndre. Like, that would make absolutely no sense. But I could so see the Wizards being a team where it's like, well, hey, like,
need a point guard.
But I will say though, like, I don't even know, all the players that they would trade are just too valuable to be like, well, we'll give this up for CP. Like, you could give up Monte Morris, but you're not getting that $30 million number. You have Beal and Porzingis as your main salary matching tool. So I do think it's harder to find like teams that would house CP3. I mean, like, if Brooklyn's trying to straddle that line of like, hey, we want to be competitive now and we want to give Mikal Bridges help, so we're going to run back the, CP3, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson partnership, and they'll give you Spencer Dinwiddie and like Patty Mills or something. Like, they're not going to give you Royce O'Neal in that deal, I don't think. So like something like that. I'm with you that there's more of a market for Ayton, but he also kind of feels like the riskier acquisition.
Well, he just costs so much for so much longer. That's the thing. And Paul can be a mistake and you're out from under it pretty quickly. With Ayton, it's like you're kind of back where the Suns are, where you're spending a significant amount of money on someone that might not warrant that level of commitment for a while. That's the concern with it. You want to give me some who says no's? Is that what you got?
Yeah. So, and these are like kind of just mostly off the cuff for me. I'm making it clear, I don't know that I would do any of these. I'm just saying like realistic packages that maybe Phoenix would try and propose. Yeah. I don't even know if they make a difference.
You just want to see me squirm is what this is about.
Well, yes, always. Yeah. So the first one would be, we've done this one, but I got to throw it back out there again. Miles Turner for DeAndre Ayton straight up. Who says no? This
is the problem with me, is I always forget what I said before. I think Turner is a better player, so I think the Pacers say no.
You're spot on then with that. I don't know how badly the relationships involved are fractured, but he was linked to the Suns after the Kevin Durant trade. But it would be CP3 and DeAndre Ayton in a sign and trade for Kyrie Irving, and then insert salary X. Is it Tim Hardaway Jr.? Is it Davis Bertans? Is it Maxi Kleber? Are you taking back Javon McGee, Reggie Bullock?
I kind of like the idea of Ayton in Dallas, and I also kind of like for Dallas not having Kyrie Irving on the team. So I think, does Phoenix say no? I don't know what to do with that.
I want to make clear, I think they should.
But yeah, I think they probably should too.
It would basically be DeAndre Ayton and Chris Paul for a Kyrie Irving sign and trade and salary X.
Yeah, no, I think the Suns should say no to that.
Would they? I feel like there's weird shit going on between KD and Kyrie right now, so I'm gonna say that
I think they
would.
would. Yeah.
This one was so CP3 for Marcus Morris and Robert Covington.
Does that make the Suns better enough? I think, well, I think the Clippers would do that. So I guess it would be the Suns that have to say no. Because I think the Clips would do it because they're not playing those other
teams
guys.
say yes. You don't have to say
No, someone's got to say no, Dan. These can't work. Yeah, I think the Suns would say no just because the Clippers would definitely say yes.
Okay. What's the other one I got here? Oh, this one, DeAndre Ayton for Keldon Johnson.
Do the Spurs get Wembanyama, which we'll find out in like 5 hours from now?
I have no idea, but they can include Zach Collins too if they're worried about using too much of their cap space on DeAndre Ayton.
I think they should do that. I think, but I'm going to give you your both teams say yes answer. Because I think obviously Johnson's a little cheaper. And we don't need to spend a bunch on centers, and then maybe Pop could coach up DeAndre Ayton. I mean, maybe that number 1 pick luster really matters. Ayton and Vassell and whoever else they get in the draft. That's kind of interesting. And so on for a while. I like that. I think that's exciting.
Here's a challenge trade. CP3 for Kyle Lowry.
Ooh. I mean, the way Lowry's playing right now, but he's like a 6th man. I think, I hate this trade. It's making me think. You tell me who you think first while I think about it.
No? If I'm the Heat, I think I say no. I might trust You trust CP3's playmaking and I guess like ability to get to his spots more than Lowry now. But if you're still invested in Tyler Hero, I think that I think Miami says no.
I think Miami says no too, and it's because Lowry's still giving you, like when you need it, volume 3-point shooting and defense and all this other stuff. And I don't know that Paul's value is as great if really in the moments that matter, Butler's going to be on the ball all the time anyway. So I don't know if he adds as much there.
Who says no? DeAndre Ayton to Oklahoma City for big Jalen Williams and 2 first-round picks, not OKC picks, other teams' picks that will be protected. The thought being Phoenix clears some flexibility, can then send those picks out in other trades.
I think that's a pretty good deal. Well, I think probably the Thunder would.
You're like the girl who was trying the kombucha drink. You remember that meme where she's like the facial expression?
I know. Well, I'm not looking at my screen, so I don't know what my doing. Terrible things probably. Do the Thunder want to be in the Ayton business? Like, this doesn't seem like a team that's trying to give a $133 million contract to a conventional non-stretch center.
That's good that he's only on the books for 102 then, isn't it?
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess they're off the hook for that first quarter of that deal. I think I think the Thunder would have to do that. They got a zillion picks. Jalen Williams is nice, but like, he's undersized as a 5 and his defense depends on taking charges. So I think the chance to get Ayton, and you could rehab his value and maybe get more for him if you decide to flip him later. How about that?
Okay. Here's who says no. CP3 to Orlando for Jonathan Isaac and Gary Harris.
Everybody says yes to that. I think that's a good trade.
I kind of feel like everybody should say no. The Magic should probably say yes.
Well, what's the difference?
Why are you going to roll the dice on Jonathan Isaac's salary would be if you think like he's healthy enough to play, actually, he would make some sense in Phoenix, but.
Because then you could play him at center and flip Ayton if you're the Suns.
Because you're not doing, if you're the Magic, you're saying you shut it down if they say Fultz and Harris for CP3. You're shutting that down, right?
I guess Magic fans and the Magic themselves really love Fultz, which I get a little bit, but I don't know if I can get quite that high.
All right, so we'll go this route. If it's Isaac, and there'll be other permutations, but Isaac and Gary Harris, and you get the flyer on Chuma Okeke.
I mean, I don't know that's not changing anything for me. Okeke's your guy. You've been on him forever. I will say Isaac is like my favorite fake trade guy because he's such a mystery box.
He's my least favorite author, I think.
Well, sure, but he might be a defensive player of the year. There's like a 5%. Well, that's way too high. There's a non-zero chance he's a first team all defense guy if he ever stays healthy.
So I don't really know that I love this one, but maybe.
How many of these do you have? How do you do this?
Would you like me to stop? I can stop.
No, I can't believe it. It's amazing.
So a sign and trade, and the permutations here would be difficult because this other team is dealing with issues as well. And it would be predicated on, okay, this player doesn't want to be in Portland anymore, but you're looking at Jeremy Grant sign and trade for DeAndre Ayton. There's Yusuf Nurkic already in Portland.
Yeah, Portland's got to get off of Nurkic somehow, which might not be easy.
That's not going to be easy either way. I want to make that clear.
No, yeah. I think I like that for Phoenix. Well, depending on what kind of number we're talking about for Jeremy Grant. But even if he's like equal money with Ayton, he seems like he makes more sense as a modern, postseason contributor. Yeah, I think that's another like pretty like bilateral yes on that one. Like it doesn't. I mean, Ayton. I don't know what to think of Ayton, but he's better than Nurkic. I think that's fair to say. And then Grant might just my running take on Grant is that he, had a really good year and was the third option on a lottery team. So how much do you pay that guy if you're Portland? Not a lot in my book.
I'm pretty much. I could have some more, but not ones that I really want to talk about because they're like two just out there. Unless you have any destinations.
You just gave me a sign and trade. Like, come on, what's out there? Give me your most out there one
for CP3 or Ayton.
You pick whatever is the most ridiculous.
All right, so CP3 to the Pelicans for Larry Nance Jr. and Jonas Valanciunas.
Ooh,
and then you're moving. Ayton.
And you're moving Ayton in a separate deal
to New Orleans.
I don't think I'm doing that if I'm New Orleans. Just even though, like, I think you got to move off Valanciunas somehow, but then you need Nance in there unless you're getting another center because Nance is your closer at the 5, and then Paul as a point guard is just like that's taking touches away from Zion. Although Zion would have to be on the basketball court, so I don't know if that's a realistic.
I mean, that's why I didn't suggest that. That was not among my favorite one.
Yeah, I set you up for failure there. I said, "What's your most ridiculous idea?" And then I dumped on it.
Oh well, okay. So this isn't like that ridiculous, but if it would be some sort of like DeAndre Ayton for Zach LaVine.
Well, I like
other
Ayton.
Pieces would have to be involved, and you could even like if the Bulls are still trying to maybe stay competitive, you could throw CP3 in there, and you get to the number of just like you're gonna have to include. I don't know, would Phoenix take on Lonzo Ball in that scenario to roll the dice on that? But sort of an Ayton for Zach LaVine swap, the assumption being, okay, Vooch is gone.
Yeah. Don't you think the Bulls would need to get a decent amount more with Ayton? Even though LaVine's contract, I don't know, but is CP3 a positive? I guess he's a positive asset, just, short-term deal. I'm doing that if I'm Phoenix. I don't know who's going to guard anybody, but I like LaVine, Booker and Durant. That's kind of exciting.
Yeah, I don't love it for Chicago.
No.
Did you want to take us out of here? I think that's a good spot. Oh, geez.
Okay. I was like just ready for the next Chris Paul trade. Yeah, everybody, thanks for listening. We had pretty awesome comment engagement this time around. Thanks for watching. If this was your first time watching, cool. You saw all the free merch or all the merch free. That Dan has.
It's not free.
Well, some of it was free. Yeah, you have to buy this stuff. I don't know why I said free. I'm getting loopy. You saw merch that you can't get from us if you were on at the beginning of the stream. Dan has stickers. If you want our merch and you want to continue to listen to us, rate, subscribe, follow us on our socials at HardwoodKnocks on Twitter and on TikTok at Hardwood_Knocks on Instagram. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. Go and give shouts out to Frank Ntilikina, which I will do right now. And I guess I'm going to apologize to close us out with Jared Allen again. I'm going back to apologizing again to Jared Allen. Thanks, everybody.